Could a pregnancy have led to this woman's death? Today we're going to find out in Investigating Iowa. Hello and welcome to Investigating Iowa. My name is Sarah. Thank you for coming back this week. We have an interesting case. It's pretty short, but it follows kind of some mysterious pattern throughout the chain of events that led up to the missing persons, which eventually led to this woman's death. But we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the possible theories behind this case as well at the end, so make sure to stick around. Before we get started with this case, I do want to give my disclaimer that I mean no disrespect to any of the families or the people that I'm talking about. I am just finding this information through online resources like case files and articles and videos to give you guys as the audience. Geraldine Maggert was a 25-year-old single working mother in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. She had her daughter, Richie, who is 4 years old, out of a previous marriage with Richard Maggert. Richard actually was living in New York at the time, and they spoke often on the phone about their daughter. And leading up to Geraldine going missing, he actually said to police that he spoke to her quite frequently. On Friday, March 22nd, 1968, Geraldine's parents, the Lemkes, came to her home to pick up Richie, to take Richie to their Elkader farm, which was approximately 2 hours away. After that, they left, and Geraldine called her work and said she wouldn't be coming in because she was sick. A few hours later, a little bit before noon, she was seen leaving her apartment with a suitcase, and shortly after that, she was seen at the bank withdrawing money. The following week, Geraldine's coworkers were really concerned because they hadn't heard from her. So they went and checked at her apartment, but nobody answered. So they contacted her parents, the Lemkes, who were taking care of Richie at the time. The Lemkes said that they hadn't heard from her either, and they didn't know of any travel plans that Geraldine might have had, but they said if she was going anywhere, maybe she went to New York to visit her ex-husband. So her coworkers went to the Cedar Rapids airport and actually found her car in the parking lot, so they just went with what the parents said. Maybe she did go to New York to visit her ex-husband. Mrs. Lemke, Geraldine's mom, was actually really concerned about this phone call, as almost any parent would, because not only did they have their granddaughter, her daughter, in their care when they didn't know that she was going out of town, they had no clue where their daughter was. And so Mrs. Lemke drove 2 hours back to Cedar Rapids to inform police that she was concerned about this. So the police and Mrs. Lemke went to Geraldine's house and couldn't get access from the outside. So they actually had to climb a ladder to get into her apartment. There were no signs of a struggle, but they did notice that her suitcase was gone. On April 6th, a Boy Scout troop was hiking about 4 miles outside of North Liberty, which is just a few miles away from Cedar Rapids. They were at a popular picnic spot called The Rock, and they noticed that down in a stream, there was a nearly naked body of a woman. An autopsy showed that the cause of death was due to a beating and also exposure, but more pressing was the fact that this woman was 3 months pregnant. Since the body was found on a federal piece of land, the FBI took the case. They scoured all the nearby woods, and they also dragged out the stream in order to see if they could find some of the missing pieces of clothing or some of what may have killed her, like a murder weapon or something to lead them to a suspect, but they didn't find anything. Richard went to police and gave a statement, as well as voluntarily gave a polygraph test. And maybe at some point I'll go through what all of a polygraph test looks at, but pretty much it monitors your body's responses as they ask you questions and you respond. So it's not super easy to cheat a polygraph test, but people have done it, and it's all about how your body reacts to stress. So again, take that with what you will. A lot of people debate whether or not, polygraphs can be used to determine somebody's fate, but a lot of times they're not able to be used in court. In July that same year, police came out and said that they had no new leads. They had the occasional lead every once in a while, but nothing came through as valid enough. At one point, they were thinking that possibly Geraldine's case had something to do with the same killer as Sheila Collins, which, if you remember, I covered Sheila Collins in cases of our neighbors before, and that was the Iowa State student who was 19 years old who was hitchhiking a ride back home and was found dead only a few miles away in Nevada. So I'm going to get into this more at the end of the video, and we'll get into that whole theory, but it's very interesting that they point this out, that it could be a possible connection. In March 2017, Richie was interviewed about her mother's death and disappearance since it was the 49th anniversary. And Richie said that she hadn't heard much about the case, that they didn't have much to go on in the first place, let alone now, especially since some of the depositions that the police took at that time period had gone missing. So they don't know where those files went. The conversation within the forums about this case were very intriguing, to say the least. One of the main ones being DNA. This gets brought up every single time with a case. And not much was really revealed in any of the articles I could find about DNA being taken at the scene, but a lot of people were questioning the DNA of the father of the baby that Geraldine was pregnant with at the time. So we could either have her ex-husband be the father or a whole nother man be the father of this baby. Either way, definitely something that people were curious for police to look into. Another topic of discussion was Richard, and even though he had passed this polygraph test and was never considered a suspect in this case, there were some rumors going around, and I'm going to put out right now, these are all rumors. I do not base any of my conclusions on this fact. So rumor has it that Richard actually had a second wife by this point, that Geraldine had gone missing and was murdered. And apparently his second wife was pregnant. And while his second wife was pregnant, he actually was cheating on his wife with his landlady. So that was a whole string of scandal that people were talking about in these forums. Again, we don't know if any of this is true. And they also pointed out that he had been possibly recently arrested for domestic abuse. Again, completely all discussion and something to think about, but I don't base any of this on fact yet. Even though police say that they're 99% sure that Sheila Collins and Geraldine Maggert are not connected, it is weird how close their cases are. Sheila Collins was hitchhiking on her way home when she was found nearly naked in a ditch. And we know that Geraldine was on her way out of town of some sort when she went to the airport and was found nearly naked in a reservoir. It's very similar, and for those cities to only be 2 hours apart, it does make you feel a little uneasy, but we'll leave that up to investigators. The last topic of discussion I want to bring up is abortion, and I do not want to assume I know what was going on in Geraldine's mind when she was 3 months pregnant. Again, but I'm just repeating everything that I found on forums and in the case files that I could find online. And I'm just going to bring up facts of what was going on with the abortion conversation in the 1960s. So Roe versus Wade didn't happen until 1973. And a lot of people were discussing that during the 1967, 1968 time period, a lot of states were starting the discussion of when is contraceptives and abortion appropriate to use. And a lot of times, abortion was only even discussed if it was a rape, incest, or if it had something to do with the mother's health declining due to the pregnancy. They also discussed contraceptives, and at that point it was only legal to use contraceptives in marriage. So you had to be married in order to be able to be prescribed a contraceptive of any form. Again, this was not nationwide. These were all just state discussions for their own legalization purposes, but we do know that Colorado in 1967 did decriminalize abortion if there was something to do with abuse, incest, rape, or if there was declining health of the mother. A lot of people in discussions were asking why she would have hid a spontaneous trip. I mean, she could have been visiting her ex-husband. She could have been visiting another person. But a lot of people speculated if she was going to get an abortion in a state that it was legal to get an abortion. So that was I just wanted to bring up some of those factors as well. Since she did withdraw money, she didn't tell people about this trip. and a few other, factors as well. So please keep that in mind, and please be respectful when discussing this in the comment section. That's all I have on this case. I will put up the phone number on the screen if you do know anything. This is a very short case, but I just felt like there was some factors with, the abortion side to it, the Sheila Collins side to it, the ex-husband never even being considered a suspect. Again, we don't know if he had an alibi or even if he was in the state at that time. So there's a lot of things to consider. And I find it shocking that they don't have a lot more information on this case, seeing as there were some weird things about it. Anyway, that's all I have for this week, and I hope to see you again next week for Cases of Our Neighbors. Thanks.